Caroline Leavitt acaba de tener una pésima conferencia de prensa. Por si no lo sabes, Caroline Leavitt es la principal vocera de Donald Trump. Mira este clip, por favor.
And as we commemorate Labor Day this year, we finally have a president who fights and delivers for the American worker every single day. President Trump believes that American workers are the heart and soul of our economy and our national identity, which is why he's championed an agenda that puts them first always. For decades, the hardworking men and women of our country who built the greatest nation in world history were sold out by selfish, greedy, short-sighted globalists who put our country on a path to economic and cultural ruin. They hollowed out our factories and towns and betrayed the American working class by shipping jobs overseas and importing millions of low-wage migrants to replace American workers. Under President Trump, this national disgrace is over. American workers are, once again, being put at the center of national trade policy, and the dignity of American labor is being defended.
The first question is associated with the shooting that occurred the other day, and I want to ask the question of, we know that it's not a gun thing. Any rational person knows it's not a gun thing. We know it's a mental health issue. So I want to know from you, what is President Trump and the White House going to do to address mental health issues around the country associated with these shootings? And the second thing is Chicago. You know, anybody with a connected brainstem knows that Chicago's crime is out of control. And young black men are getting killed, laying dead in the middle of the streets every single day in Chicago. No president has addressed any of these issues. And so what is the White House going to do to address issues in their capacity to deal with the conflict and violence in Chicago?
Sure. Well, to your first question about this shooting in Minnesota, right now, the administration is focused on helping the people of Minnesota. It's been less than a day, of course, since this tragedy happened. We have federal law enforcement on the ground assisting local law enforcement. This investigation is ongoing. There's still a lot of facts to understand about these circumstances.
Mira este otro momento totalmente desastroso. No lo puedo ni creer. Mira, por favor.
To Brandon's question, 1,300 short in Chicago, 3,000 short in New York, 500 short here in Washington, D.C. What can the White House, what can the President do to help recruitment of police officers who've done well with the military and Border Patrol? What can be done to get more police officers on the streets of America?
Well, the president has certainly been very successful in recruiting federal law enforcement. If you look at the ICE recruitment campaign that was led by he and our Secretary of Homeland Security, we've seen more than, I believe, 130,000 applicants to join ICE, which is just amazing. There's more applicants now than there are jobs to fill, and we're very grateful for that. Clearly, Americans want to serve their communities. They just need a leader who encourages them to do so. So maybe Governor Pritzker should spend less time demonizing the police, more time trying to recruit more police, and more time trying to call the President of the United States to get crime in his city under control. The President wants to allow law enforcement, whether it's state, local, federal, to do their jobs, to arrest criminals, to put them behind bars, and to remove public safety threats from American communities. He'll continue to do that. Thank you, guys.
Y esto sigue por exactamente el mismo camino. Claro que te creemos, Caroline. Claro que te creemos. Mira el clip, por favor.
Question if I could, Caroline. Question if I could. Sorry. I wonder if you could answer why the president hasn't acknowledged the shooting at CDC headquarters that took place earlier in August, where a police officer was killed, and it was reported that the motivation for the shooting was somebody who was really unhappy with the effects of the COVID vaccine.
We absolutely were very much aware of that shooting. The Secretary of Health and Human Services put out a statement immediately. He was in touch with the CDC, and he actually traveled to Georgia to assess the situation and to mourn with the people who work in that building there. As a result, President Trump has already brought in nearly $10 trillion in new private and foreign investments so that the top businesses in the world can create high-paying jobs in America and hire American workers to fill them.
Si te preguntas, ¿todo esto va a empeorar? ¿Va a seguir así? ¿Qué va a pasar? Esto es lo que significa el régimen de 2025 de Donald Trump. Mira el clip, por favor.
On the Intel deal, where the U.S. got a stake in that company, there's two things I want to ask about that. The first is, what did the U.S. get back in return for that deal? And the second thing is, what are the future plans for giving any form of money to another company? It could be through the CHIPS Act, like this deal, or some other form of funds. What are the plans there by this White House administration?
Well, look, as you know, Brian, very well, because you cover it often, the Intel deal is still being ironed out by the Department of Commerce. The T's are still being crossed, the I's are still being dotted. It's very much still under discussion. But the president's thinking, I can share with you, is certainly to ensure that the United States government is making our country wealthy again and is benefiting from some of these deals. And it's a creative solution. I know it's outside the box thinking, which is uncommon in this city, but it's something that he proposed and something that the Secretary of Commerce is working on putting into action. Mary.
I've seen a lot of calls for action, among these lawmakers saying that we shouldn't just be praying. One that I've seen on the right actually is calls for the FBI to institute a new class of domestic terrorism that involves trans ideology. Is that something that the administration would support?
I would have to check with the appropriate people on that.
Daniel. I have two questions for you.
Sure.
Democrats, including former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, attacked prayer and pushed gun control in the aftermath of yesterday's shooting. What's the White House's response to their comments?
Yes, I saw the comments of my predecessor, Ms. Psaki, and frankly, I think they're incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith across this country who believe in the power of prayer, who believe that prayer works, and who believe that in a time of mourning like this, when beautiful young children were killed while praying in a church, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith. And I would encourage Ms. Psaki to pray for these families themselves, who need it right now more than ever.
Y nuevamente, uno de los momentos más humillantes de todo esto. Mira el clip, por favor.
Question has to do with, I just had one more, if I may. It has to do with the president's intention to remove Lisa Cook as a member of the Federal Reserve Board. He is going or acting upon allegations that have been made by Trump administration official Bill Pulte. These are just allegations. She hasn't been convicted yet of any crime. Is the administration opposed to allowing Ms. Cook to have due process, to challenge what has been alleged against her?
I believe she is challenging it. I believe she just filed a lawsuit today, and Mr. Pulte has deferred those allegations over to the Department of Justice to investigate them. What I will say is that you had these mortgage receipts very clearly shown to the president, and he has the cause that he needs to fire this individual. He laid it out in the letter that he provided to her and to the public as well. And so we'll continue to fight this battle. Carrie.
Y yo te podría traer un sinfín de momentos muy vergonzosos de esto, pero simplemente te traigo los más importantes o los que yo considero más importantes. Mira, por favor.
Carolyn, thank you so much. First, on the firing of the CDC director,
Sure.
Who will replace her? And then also, overnight, the White House said that she did not align with the president's agenda. Dr. Menard's attorneys say that she refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives and fired dedicated health experts. What specifically did she do wrong?
Look, what I will say about this individual is that her lawyer's statement made it abundantly clear themselves that she was not aligned with the president's mission to make America healthy again. And the secretary asked her to resign. She said she would, and then she said she wouldn't. So the president fired her, which he has every right to do. It was President Trump who was overwhelmingly reelected on November 5th. This woman has never received a vote in her life, and the president has the authority to fire those who are not aligned with his mission. A new replacement will be announced by either the president or the secretary very soon. And the president and Secretary Kennedy are committed to restoring trust and transparency and credibility to the CDC by ensuring their leadership and their decisions are more public-facing, more accountable, strengthening our public health system, and restoring it to its core mission of protecting Americans from communicable diseases, investing in innovation to prevent, detect, and respond to future threats. That's the mission of the CDC, and we're going to make sure that folks that are in positions of leadership there are aligned with that mission.
En lo personal, yo considero que Caroline Leavitt va más allá de lo vergonzoso. No lo puedo ni creer. Mira el clip, por favor.
Iris.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions on the shooting. What's the administration's message to some concerned parents across the country who might be now worried about their kids' safety in light of the latest incident?
We completely and totally understand the concerns of parents across the country. This tragedy it's heartbreaking. As a parent myself, there are no words to describe just the heartbreak that these families must be enduring, which is why the president and the first lady have encouraged everyone to continue to pray for these families and these victims. And it's why this administration is focused on removing public safety threats from our communities. And in fact, I can share with all of you that last night in Washington, D.C., when arrests were being made, there was an arrest of a juvenile right here in D.C. in Ward 7 for threats to kidnap and injure, receiving stolen property, possession of a large capacity feeding device, unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition. A search warrant was executed. 7 firearms were recovered, and the juvenile was arrested after an investigation was initiated based on social media posts allegedly threatening violence towards a school. So this was a juvenile who was a risk to not just himself, but the community here in Washington, and he was removed from the community last night because of the law enforcement efforts of this administration. And I would also point to the statement of our wonderful First Lady that she released yesterday. She wrote, "The tragic mass killing in Minnesota illuminates the need for preemptive intervention in identifying school shooters. Early warning signs are often evident, with many individuals exhibiting concerning behaviors and making violent threats online prior to their actions. We encourage all Americans, as the old saying goes, if you see something, say something. If you see warning signs or threats, report it to law enforcement. This administration, federal law enforcement, will take those reports and those threats seriously. They will be treated as a law enforcement emergency, and we will act accordingly."
And on the first lady,
Brian.
Thank you, Caroline. 2 questions. Bouncing off the CDC situation at CDC, I'm curious if administration officials are pushing back on the president's agenda, privately, publicly, however, should they fear to lose their jobs going forward?
Look, I think if you're doing your job well, and if you are executing on the vision and the promises that the president made to the public who elected him back to this office, then you should have no fear about your job. Just do your job. That's what this president wants to see. He wants to see people solving problems. He wants to see the people who have the privilege of serving the American taxpayer and the federal government abiding by the wishes of the American taxpayers who overwhelmingly reelected him in this cabinet to make America great again, or in this case, make America healthy again.
On the Intel deal where the U.S.
Yo creo que esto lo resume todo. Miren esto, por favor, no se pierdan este clip.
Mary.
Thanks, Caroline. I have a couple questions on the shooting yesterday. The first one, this is the second shooting involving a trans-identifying shooter who specifically targeted Christians and Catholic kids. What kind of consequences do the gender-affirming therapists, doctors, or even the parents of these shooters face after these types of shootings?
Well, as for the parents and potential therapists in this case, again, all of that is still currently being investigated by the FBI. I know the Secretary of Health and Human Services this morning said that HHS is investigating perhaps links between some of these drugs and these prescription drugs that some of these minors may be taking and an increase in violence. And obviously, we have mental health problems in this country that this administration and Secretary Kennedy will continue to speak out about in the work that we're doing to solve it.
Ahí lo tienen, amigos, como se los dije al principio del video. Una rueda de prensa totalmente vergonzosa por parte de Caroline Leavitt. Como siempre te digo, para mí lo más importante es tu opinión y me encantaría que la dejes en los comentarios. Además, si te gusta el contenido de política estadounidense, te gusta estar informado con lo que realmente está pasando en Estados Unidos, te va a encantar suscribirte al canal, ya que subo videos todos los días. Mi nombre es José Alvarado, soy economista y estoy comprometido con informarte diariamente. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.